So thank you. So it's my turn to start, actually, guys. So Patricia and I have the pleasure now of building on what we were speaking about before, where previously we were talking about the skills that trainers and trainees need, and we were talking before about the way in which you can facilitate learning. What we now want to do, and our main aims really in this second session, is to begin to demonstrate in a little bit more detail how we can begin to develop engaging online learning sessions. Now, once again, we are aware that we have people with a broad base of skills here, but what we want to make sure we do is enable all of us to have that grounding, that same foundation, which we can then take away and practice with again. Now, we've already highlighted online learning today. Today is all about online learning, so why do we do it? Now, I want us to forget that we have an issue with COVID-19 at the moment, because that's forcing us to use online training. But actually, online training is something that all training organizations should already have as part of their offer. So we've already seen, so particularly in the country where I'm based in the UK, even if we think about supermarkets and retailers, those that do not offer an online element are missing on a large customer base. You know, millions of UK pounds they're missing out on because they don't have that online offer. Now, as a training organization, if you don't have some kind of online offer, before we even talk about COVID-19, you are missing out on potential trainees, customers, users, whatever phrase you want to use. As we've mentioned already, the benefits of using online learning are vast. Yes, there are some challenges, and we'll talk about those challenges in a moment in our breakout spaces, actually. But the ability to have an international customer base without actually having to leave your own living room is incredible. You know, so using online learning, potentially the costs are far lower, and actually the revenue, the number of people you can work with increases as a result. So we're going to look at some of the features of online learning in a moment, how we can use them. But I think it's important to dwell upon the fact that actually, if you weren't already online, you should be online, because before COVID, you were missing out. With COVID, there's a chance your training organization may not be here in 6 months or a year's time if you do not have that online offer in the first place. Now, again, we've spoken about some of the key features, and we're going to go through them again in a moment. So we are going to talk about some of the ways you can engage your learners. So we've mentioned already, well, Patricia did in our previous session, the idea of the whiteboard, a really easy feature to explore. And again, Zoom isn't the only way in which you can do that, but we're all using Zoom today for our session, for our conference today. It seems pertinent, it seems apt that we use Zoom to explore this. We're also going to look at the idea of our breakout spaces as well. So let's then think a bit more about our pre-session. So Patricia, if we're going to pretend now that this is a session, we're going to pretend now that everyone listening is our learners today. How will the pre-session work? Because it's no different to us as a teacher face-to-face anyway, isn't that right?
Very true. So, but the only difference is we don't have the audience to deliver the lesson to. So, well, in terms of pre-session planning, a lot needs to go into it. That's the major difference, really, between face-to-face, where you are in the classroom, or when you are delivering online. In order for your virtual training or for your online delivery to be effective, you need to ensure that there's more emphasis on engagement, because otherwise you will lose your learners. I have done some quality assurance work into online delivery, online training, online classrooms. And what we found that was the learners, even those in the universities or the adults who are being trained, they log on, they sign up, they say, yes, I'm here now as participants. But then after a while, they just leave it on and then they just go about their business. They are not engaged. And that's what we found that when we've done quality assurance work of working online. So then what do we do as trainers? What we are saying here is you need to incorporate ideas, you need to incorporate activities, you need to incorporate a lot of things into your virtual learning training or your delivery that will generate greater engagement, that will generate interaction, because otherwise you will lose your learners. But above all of these things, we want a situation where your trainees are enjoying the delivery, the materials that you are using are relevant. We've talked about materials today. We're also hammering on materials again now. That your materials, your training materials are relevant. And at the end of the day, your learners are learning. They are being trained or they are being retrained, because otherwise we will lose the essence of online learning. So what we are saying here is these are the activities or the things that must be considered at your pre-session planning. Next slide. Okay, so let's look at a bit of theory now. We're now looking at some principles here for effective teaching, particularly if it's going to be online. So it's about prior knowledge. So for example, today in the second session, or the first one we did, we sort of asked people to rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 5. So that's about establishing prior learning, prior knowledge. We want to know where our learners are pitched or where our trainees are pitched, so that when we are discussing and when we are interacting, we are ensuring that the learning needs of everybody is taken on board, and that we are attending to their needs. Then it's also good to distribute. Sometimes when you come into a session, if it's a physical one, you might need to give materials before the lesson or during the lesson. But what we are saying here is with online delivery, you can email, we've talked about email today, your participants, the materials that you will be using. And then in the course of delivery, you always check lesson, understanding. Another word for that is targeted questioning, where you target questions to all participants. So for example, we've got 91 participants today. If time had allowed us, we will actually be targeting individuals in this training forum and be asking certain questions. But because of time constraints, we will not be doing that. But that was why we then suggested that you should make your comments in the chat box. Again, that's a way of getting participants involved, and that's also a way of checking understanding. Because if we just go ahead delivering and we don't check understanding, then we do not know where learners are, and then we are also likely to lose learners as we go along. Some other things that can be done, or as that are also part of basic principles of learning, are the support for your learners. You monitor their learning, you evaluate, because evaluation enables you to reflect on how good the session had gone. Remember, Dr. Olowe has said today that he wants people to complete an evaluation form of all the sessions we've had. Then the evaluation form is sent to us. So that's for us to be able to evaluate our practice based on the learning that has taken place. It is also necessary that we stretch and challenge our participants. We know today that there are some participants that are in the high level skill ability. We do not wish to pitch the lesson or the training or our presentation today at a low level, because if we do, we will lose their interest. So it's just a question of moving really from the basic to intermediate and also to advanced. So, you know, I'm sure most of you already anyway practice that principle of stretch and challenge. And then as the training session is happening, you can do the retrieval practice, which is really looking at where people are and then reviewing. So you may want to retrieve something and put something back because you feel that, you know, more time needs to be spent in an action or in a material. And then there are also new learnings. And then finally, practice guides to industry. So at the end of the day, you don't want to spoon feed. You want to start from the scratch and then get your learners to a point where they can learn independently. I hope that makes sense so far. And if there's any question, please do ask as we go along, particularly around these basic principles of effective teaching and learning. I will be keeping an eye on the chat box in case somebody raises a question. Next slide, please. Right. There are some assumptions that are in place when you are designing your online teaching materials. We want to assume that your virtual technology is stable. That word stable, I mean, some people have come back to say it's questionable, but it's an assumption that your technology is stable, that it is reliable, that right in the middle of your delivery, it doesn't give up on you. But if for any reason that does happen, the world will not come to an end. You can always pick up from it. It's like when you are being observed, you are teaching and something goes wrong. It's part of your skill as a teacher to be able to retrieve and then also go over what has happened or go over your lesson plan because you've experienced a technical glitch. That's one of the things that, an assumption for an experienced trainer. Also, there's an assumption here that the training provider knows the capability of their trainers. We've talked about that already today. Also, we are assuming here that the trainers have done a training needs analysis and they understand the training. We're going to use a strategy, the restore strategy. There's a lot of papers on this restore strategy, which I'm going to employ people to find time to look at so that you are just familiar with the restore strategy for effective online learning and the things that must be considered. So at the top level of the strategies for effective online learning are the cognitive and the mental ability of your trainees and the trainer itself. We've discussed that already. How capable are they with the use of the technology? And that's where the rating on a scale of 1 to 5 comes in. So we sort of model that to you today. It's also important to consider the psychological, the health and well-being of your trainees and the trainer. Because sometimes, you might just, maybe there's been a training planned and for some reasons, the trainer falls ill. And then the organization then decides to very quickly pull somebody from the L&D department to deliver the training. There could be issues of anxiety. So what we are saying here is, as managers, is to empathize, to give them time, and for management to be sensitive to their needs. Also, as trainers, this could happen to your trainees, where, for example, you require them to present something. There could be high anxiety level. So what we are saying here is be aware of that, be considerate, and work around their sensitivity of their needs to ensure that they are ready when the time comes to deliver. And then you are able to support them as they are delivering, just to ensure that the anxiety does not take over the training, the work that they're doing. We shouldn't forget safety on online delivery. I think something happened some time ago. I can't remember now I can't remember if it was in Japan or so, where online app delivery was happening and hackers were able to go into the delivery. And that caused a lot of chaos. And that's why with Zoom, what normally happens is for you to join, you can set up your settings so that for somebody to join your training, they wait in the lobby. And then you, the host, you verify that, yes, this is a legitimate person who needs to be in this training session. Once you are able to verify that, then you let them in. That's a major safety concern that we need to consider as management, or also as trainers, so that we do not sabotage or that we do not discredit ourselves when we are undertaking training activity. there are some parts of the world where, you know, trainers, we're now looking at digital poverty, where trainers do have issues with Wi-Fi and the use of data. This could be quite traumatic for them, where a lot of work has gone into preparation. The research has happened, and then you are willing and ready to deliver, but unfortunately, you run into difficulties with connectivity. We're keeping an eye on the comments that is being posted today in the chat. A lot of people have been saying, like we've even experienced with data connection. That's something that we will from time to time encounter. Therefore, we need to be aware of that. And if that is the situation, what are you as trainers doing to ensure that we mitigate against this? That's something that we need to keep our eyes on. Also, there are times where in the course of your delivering, you do have to use an opportunity that presents itself. When I used to work with Ofsted, Ofsted is a regulatory body that regulates delivery in primary, secondary, further education, universities, sometimes to Ofsted with the regulatory body. Also goes to training organization to observe training, and then they make a recommendation. Sometimes what Ofsted says when I used to do training with, when I used to do observation with them is the trainer or the teacher missed an opportunity. So what are they saying here? They are saying that in the course of training, something happens in the classroom that the trainer could have capitalized on. The trainer could have capitalized on it. So for example, maybe one of your training makes a valuable comment, but because you are following your scheme of work, your lesson plan, you sort of ignore that comment, which is so valuable, which you could have used to influence training happening. So what we are saying here is, be flexible, please, colleagues, be flexible during your online delivery. And when opportunity arises, jump on it, make use of it. Do not lose that opportunity, even if it means, you know, it's going to add another 2-3 minutes to your plan for the day. It's better for you to extend than to miss a valuable opportunity. I'm just waiting for, yeah. Okay, so all of these things that I've covered in terms of the strategy for online learning are in the pack that will be made available to you. So what we are going to do next, what Michael is going to anchor now, is how we use the breakout room or the breakout session within Zoom to do work. Because sometimes in your organization, you might, you know, have to deliver training to 50, 60, even 20 people. It then becomes disruptive, it becomes difficult, where if you are unable to sort of manage the learners and manage activities. Just like when you are in a physical classroom where you have 100 people and then you do all your talks, sometimes then you then say, now let's stop, let's do this group work. You can monitor it, you can walk about, you can see what they are doing, you can give them feedback. What we are saying here is you can also do something similar in Zoom, where people can do group work, and then you as the facilitator or the trainer can go into each of those groups, give them feedback, even get them to feedback to the entire group, the rest of the participants, what has happened, or what the learning or what the discussion is all about. And then this is another form of teaching and learning, or another form of training. So we're going to practice that today. We did say in the morning when we were with Mrs. Akiyemi that we're going to have an opportunity to practice something. So this is going to be an opportunity of how you can actually do that within Zoom. Over to you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. So, yeah, we've spoken. Patricia spoke at length there about the ways in which we can engage our learners and undertake learning as well. Now, I want to talk to you some of the practical ways we can do that, which is what Patricia was saying. So, it may very well be if we return to this document here, it may well be that actually our pre-assessment task was that we asked before the session began for people to complete that task I asked you in our last session, which was 5 things that you see as health and safety risks. And then what I can do is during the session, I can be looking at that together with the students, and I could be sharing my slides, sharing my view as I'm doing now. And I can now, if it's a much smaller session, I can say, for example, I can see some names such as Samuel. So I might say, Samuel, let's look at your work together. Can you please comment on what you have done? So what I would do then as the trainer at that point is I would unmute Samuel and I would say, Samuel, what are your views on that? Or I might say, well, actually, Abraham, I'm going to come to you second. Or it might be as I scroll further down the list alphabetically, it might be that I say, Eva, I'm going to come to you third. So be ready. Because as Patricia has said, sometimes because of cultural sensitivities, some people don't have their video on. So how can you ensure they're actually in the room with you? So that's a very, very easy way. So it might be that I say, okay, well, Francis, in a moment, I'm going to ask you your opinion. So you can hear, just like in a normal classroom, you're using the list of names in your area, or as we did earlier, you can say, okay, please now leave a comment in the chat box and we'll use that to discuss. That's a great way in which you can engage your learner during your session. There are other things that we can do as well. So if I share my screen with you once more and we return to, for example, here. Well, here is a quiz. Again, based on that health and safety example, so we could keep the theme the same. And I could do this now as a pre-assessment task. I could have sent this link to my group of learners before the start of our session and asked them to complete it. Or what I can do is, if I know I'm working with a smaller group, well, we can do that together. So I might say at this point, okay, Patricia, do you mind reading the question to everybody, please? So now I know Patricia's listening. She's not gone off somewhere to make herself a drink. She's here in the room with us. And what I might do is I might let Patricia read the question. I might ask other people to answer, give me the options, and then we might discuss. So again, I might say, Fatima, what answer would you say would be the one that is appropriate? Why? And now you can hear that actually, just as if we were in the same room with these people, we're engaging in the same kind of discussion as well, using online tools such as quizzes to assess their prior knowledge, which we can then decide upon whether I need to go back over this if the class hasn't got it, or I can proceed with the rest of the session in the same way. Now, one of the other things that Patricia has spoken about a moment ago as well is the idea of the breakout space. Now, in order for us to do that, what we would typically have along the bottom of your Zoom presentation is a button which says breakout. Now, we don't have that today on this, unfortunately. So what we would need to do there is you would simply click on the settings in Zoom and you identify that you would have breakout as one of the ways in which you are able to do that. What it then does is automatically put you into different groups. Now, one of the tasks that we were going to explore together was the idea of the challenges that you face. So one of the things I'm going to ask you all to do now, and we will do this by the chat box feature rather than doing it automatically in our breakout spaces, is the following. So can we now please, after we've looked at the idea of think, pair and share again in a second, what I'd now like us to do is this activity, as we can see here. So can we now, in the comments section, please, and again, if we've, and I apologize that we don't have the breakout space at the moment because of the settings, but if in the comment box, you can now note down what you feel some of the challenges are, and if you can then note down how you feel they could be overcome, then we can begin to do that as a group discussion as well. So I'm going to unshare my screen. So again, in the comments section for me, please. So I can already see that Rita has highlighted that funding is an issue. Now, is anyone able in the comments section to respond to that challenge for Rita? How can she overcome the idea of funding, please?
Yeah.
So again, Rita's highlighted not just funding, but poor broadband. Again, anyone who is listening now, how do we overcome that? You know, we've got issues. How do we overcome those, please? Write down some of those responses in that comment box, please.
Thank you very much, Rita. Yeah. Yeah. So network issues continues to be a challenge. Yeah.
Thank you, Francis, as well. So passive participation, and hopefully what we're showing you here by saying, so for example, I have yet to receive an answer from, he says at random, let's go with, I have someone here who has their name listed as Nokia 1. So if I said, I haven't yet received an answer from Nokia 1, that will hopefully alert that individual that they should be participating. Also, what I'd say about that passive participation is, just like in any session, if you've set work, homework, tasks outside the classroom, if they're not doing that, well, how do you normally engage that person? Well, you would potentially telephone them. You'd speak to them face to face and say, I need you to do these things, please. That's how we also go with that. We have also here, so for example, Mr. Sloja, thank you. And so we can look beyond the organization for funding. So that's an interesting response to that solution.
Yeah. A lot of people seem to have highlighted technology, broadband and Wi-Fi connection as a major issue.
Yes, and what I'd say to that as a solution is, if, for example, you know there's issues for your trainees or even your trainers when it comes to broadband, well, that obviously makes delivering live sessions very difficult. Yeah. So if you know your broadband is intermittent, well, instead of using live recordings, then record it. Pre-record your lecture, and then that means that the trainees can access it at any time that they wish. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That would be really useful as well.
Can I just ask, Dr. Olowe, are you going to be able to send a handout on breakouts to participants, please?
Yes, we will do that.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
We get all the handouts forwarded to all the participants. We'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll take about 30 more seconds as well before I move on to show you some other engagement tools. So Francis as well, thank you for that. It's talked about the competency of your participants. And again, that comes back to what any teacher, what any trainer would do. It's about understanding, you know, so I heard a phrase once when I was training, who are your learners and what do they know? So if you understand your learners, if you understand what they do and do not know, we are then able to plan our sessions accordingly as well. Yeah. And thank you, Rita, for that response as well. So Rita said, for competency, I would suggest that people invest in themselves if they want to go far. Knowledge is not cheap. Be willing to invest in yourself for you or growth. And again, we talked about how training organizations might train and support their staff to help with career progression as well. So thank you. So let's now look at a couple of, so there's an example of how we can use, you know, that's effectively how a breakout space would work.
Sorry, Mike. Mike, yes. Can I ask Pat, if we make you the host right now, will it still be possible for us to do the breakout section?
I think so, yeah. Aren't we, Michael?
Okay, well, we do that now.
Well, you would, yeah, you just need to make sure that in the settings that you have enabled the breakout space. Otherwise, it will be the same for Patricia as it is for me.
Yes, you are now the host, Pat.
Okay, so Michael, what did you say?
So it would need to be that the settings would need to have been adjusted outside of this meeting to allow the breakout space to happen. So if the settings haven't been altered, then you'll be seeing the same thing as me. So it would be an option for you at the bottom. Simply a button that says breakout. We click breakout, and it automatically then.
No, it's not showing on the screen here. No. It's got to be done outside. Yeah, you're correct.
That's no problem. So we'll just move forward. So again, another tool we can use is the whiteboard. So that we can see here, let's say we were having that group discussion, and you can all see my board now as well. So let's say we were having that group discussion. Well, then obviously what I can do is I could have noted down some of the comments that Rita has highlighted. So she highlighted points 1, 2, and 3, for example. It could be as well that I use things like the drawing tool. So if I am taking feedback from people, so what are your views? How do you feel about this? And I can obviously highlight different ideas that we've seen already. That is simply by clicking share on Zoom, you can then have that feature. So many of us quite like using the whiteboard, quite like taking down notes and saying, look, get this down, write this down. So the whiteboard, as you can see here, which we can save and send to people, is another really easy tool that can be used during your sessions to help support your learners. But what I would say is, so there are some examples of the ways in which we can engage during a session, but what about when we get to post the session as well? So post session is going to be really, really important. So just like any form of teaching, I was always taught, and it may be different for you, but your marking creates your planning. So when you have assessed what your learners can do, and that might be when we assess, it could just be in a discussion. It could be that they've completed a quiz or they've written an assignment. It's only when you mark what they have or assess what they have written that you're then able to plan. Because I now know what my learners do and do not know. So with that in mind, it sets up the next session. So quality feedback is going to be really important. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Once we've given them the feedback and once we know the limitations, well, of course, we plan our session and that cycle continues. What are you going to release before the session? Are there materials that they have to read? Is there research they have to complete before the session? These are the things that you need to know. Now, let me go back here to quality feedback, because there's been plenty of research which suggests that the better the quality of feedback, the more your trainees will learn. So there's a phrase that you may have heard of called tick and flick. So basically that's the idea that a teacher or a trainer will simply look through someone's work and just tick and turn the page, flick the page. That's no good to anybody.
No.
You might have read that, but what is the trainee learning? What have they actually developed from that? Now, I spoke earlier about the free recording software, and apologies. So what we can use, and I'll share you my screen now, is there is plenty of free online software that you can use, and one of them is called Loom. So it's loom.com. It's a Chrome extension, and what that allows you to do for free is to excuse me, to record your screen or face in the same way we're doing now. So what I've got here, if we come back to my notes, is you can see, and again, I could have been sharing this with an individual learner. I could now be using this as materials in my session. So what we have here is an example of feedback to a student. So I'm just going to play this for you all now. Wonderful. So we'll try one more time, he says, and then I'll do it for you live instead. Okay, no problem. And this is exactly the point we're making, aren't we? You know, when things don't work live, what do we do? So actually, what I'm going to demonstrate to you is this then. So I'm going to click on the Loom link, and we're going to do this together now. So you can see here, it's loading up live. I can change it to camera if I wanted to, but I'm just going to go with screen only. And I'm going to press to start the recording. And I'm going to highlight my entire screen for now. Now, it might run a little bit slow because obviously I'm doing Zoom as well as doing this. But I'm now recording. So what I can do here is, let's pretend the screen I'm looking at now, or the presentation actually, is the work. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, Patricia, I'm actually going to assess your work on this, okay? So good afternoon, Patricia. Thank you for sending me through this work. It's very, very interesting. I, in particular, quite like this slide that you have here. I like that you've made it nice and clear. I like that we can clearly see what your learning aims are. What I haven't seen, which would be interesting, and you could develop this further, I'd like to see maybe in your notes section what links you're going to use, how long you might spend on this particular presentation. If we look on this slide, I like the idea of the highly confident skills. What again I know people will be interested in is seeing examples and how we can do that. And then once I've created the recording, I look forward to seeing you, Patricia, in our next session next week. Don't forget to do the work that's been set to you. I'll email it to you after this. I click stop the share, and you can see that what we now have is that feedback. So if there's issues with networking for your trainees, and we accept, but I'm now recording. So what I can do here is so you can see now they've got quality feedback. You've spoken through the work with them. I can even edit this all for free. If I wanted to now, I can then use that recording as the start of my next session with the learners. So we can now go through. So I can say, look, here's Patricia's work. In your breakout spaces, what feedback would you give Patricia? And then once I've got discussion from them, I can then take that feedback as a group as well. So let me summarize now. So what we looked at in our session today, so we've thought about online learning, and we have highlighted the fact that learning online is no different to the way in which you would learn if you were delivering face-to-face sessions. The only difference is the medium that you use and the tools you use. We've also made sure we've highlighted the importance of preparing, because if you fail to prepare to fail, basically. And you've seen we've talked about how to set up the pre-session, the things to do during the session, and how to use effective feedback post-session. You've also seen what happens when things don't quite go right. So you can see in the session with Patricia and I today, our video didn't work. Oh well, you know, we were confident enough to be able to use the materials to show you how you can resolve that. And again, one of the big things that we need to think about here, one of the issues that we've highlighted for most of us, the challenge, is connectivity and network. So we've already highlighted that if that's one of your major issues, then pre-record your sessions, and then you can deliver that to the candidates whenever they wish. So that's one way in which you can overcome that challenge. And again, it's been an absolute pleasure working with Patricia and all of you today. It's an honor to be speaking in front of you. And if there are any questions, Patricia and I are very happy to answer those. But thank you all once again. It's a real pleasure.